Wednesday.
Yeah.
Go on a Tuesday. Not
Let's get this on a Wednesday. It's true. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. I suppose we could bring it out over here. It goes from the Shabbos. All right, so what I'm actually going to do tonight is in Eretz Hashem. There's a wonderful set of Sfarim called Panini Halacha by Rabbi Lazar Melamed, who's Rosh Shiva in Eretz Yisrael. So tonight, actually, again, I want to do like a self-contained section. We haven't quite finished the halachos of Bishul, but from many moons ago. So tonight I want to do the section on Hatmana. So it's page 212 in the handout that you have over here, and this is a very nice self-contained sugya in Eretz Hashem. Self-contained sugya. We'll see Hatmana. So we'll say Hatmana is insulation. Now again, there's no malach of Hatmana. Hatmana comes under the umbrella of Bishul, of cooking. So it goes like this. As we know, you're not allowed to kindle a fire on Shabbos. I'm on page 212, the section that says Chaf Beis. So he says, Yeshna baya lishma achom hatavshilim. So obviously, because I can't start a fire on Shabbos, so therefore what? So therefore there's an issue of going ahead and maintaining the warmth in food. I'm sorry, by the way, we have hole punchers. I realize afterwards everybody has the binders. So okay, well, we'll punch holes afterwards. So there's an issue. So obviously, again, so I can't kindle a fire on Shabbos, right? So halacha l'maisa again. So halacha l'maisa, how do I keep food warm on Shabbos? So the Gemara says, "Kiyom yishlanu plata chashmala shepalzer sasabaya." So again, Ramalama writes, so today, Baruch Hashem, today we have an electric hot plate, right? And this electric hot plate takes care of all the problems. Ulam. Now, by the way, in one of the previous room we discussed the hot plate a little bit, and essentially for our purposes, what we're going to assume is that a hot plate has the status of a stovetop with a blech. Let's just work under that assumption right now. So when you have a hot plate, that is like having a covered stove. Okay. Ulam bizman chazal hayakasha yosher lishmar al chomatav shilim. Derech achos haisa la'aniach es hagedera imamachal hamuvushalim bikira or betanor. So obviously, one way in which you can go ahead and keep food warm on Shabbos is how? Put it inside an oven. Now, remember again, I'll say from our previous explorations in Bishul, we saw you can't really put food in an oven. Why can't you put food in an oven on Shabbos? Why not? Because that's mechsek mebashal, right? That has the appearance of cooking. So one really can't go ahead and do that on Shabbos. What's the about the sheets? Even if the oven is on, if the oven's not on, it's not doing anything for you anyway, right? But l'maisa, so putting it in the oven is obviously not going to be a possibility because the mechsek mebashal has the appearance, ultimately again, of cooking. So what would vaderech hashniya litmon sakidera besoch tzemer o davar acher sheishmar al chom hakidera. So the other thing that they used to do is they would go ahead and insulate the pot. This is the concept of hatmana. So what you would do is you would take a pot of food, you would go ahead and again, in times of the Gemara, you would cover it with wool. Right? You would essentially cover it with wool, and this would maintain the heat of the pot. Ella, sheshnei isurim asur chachamim b'derech hatmana. So interestingly enough, so what we're going to see is as follows. Now, at first glance, you'd say to yourself, should it be mutter or asur to insulate a pot? Right? So again, so let's just play this out, right? So my pot's on the blech, it's on the blech before Shabbos, so I want to just cover it. Now again, so to contemporize this a little bit, you take a towel, and you just want to wrap the pot in a towel. What would you say, mutter or asur? Mutter, why?
It's already cooked.
I'm not doing anything. In other words, there's nothing that's happening over here. Now, I'm just maintaining the heat. Now, the concern, just to understand what's driving this a little bit, and by the way, this might sound a little bit foreign to you because you don't see people doing this as much. Although some of the old timers still wrap it. Yeah, correct. The blanket, good. You see this in Eretz Yisrael. So right, correct. Not as much. I'm sorry.
We're not old. 1953.
You're mature. Not aged. Finally aged, like fine Moscato. No, I know my customer. I know my customers. So
Dr. Pepper, still be calling you a Rashi light.
It's the Moscato ballet. It's the Moscato with a cork, not a screw top. So that's or not a can. They do make it with a cork. Yeah, you need to get out a little bit more, right? So again, so remember again what they used to do was. So they would go. So again, at first glance, it should appear that this should be totally mutter, right? Let's see if a sheet. Yeah, good. New one for tonight. I'm sorry, no holes punched. I apologize, but so again, so we'll say so lemaisa. So the issue we're going to see over here, that's at play, is exer shemi echata. we're concerned that anything you do that has the potential to accelerate heat or amplify heat, there becomes a concern that you may come to adjust the heat source itself. So now let's see what Rambam says. I'm on page 212, in section Chaf Beis, the second paragraph. So essentially, there are two isurim, two prohibitions when it comes to insulation. Ha'echad be'erev Shabbos, v'hasheni b'Shabbos. So one prohibition is going to be on Friday afternoon, erev Shabbos, and one is going to be on Shabbos itself. So now watch this. Ha'echad shel lahatmin b'davar shemosif hevel. So we'll say is we're going to see in the world of insulation, there are two different types of insulation, two different types of hatmana. There's what's called hatmana b'davar shemosif hevel, which means to insulate something with an item that increases heat. So, for example, we'll see there are Talmudic examples of this and contemporary examples of this. So that's one type of insulation. Covering a pot with something that will actually intensify the heat in the pot. And then he goes on and he says, so let's see. We're explain this first, and then we'll apply it. So two different types of insulation. Type 1 is a type of insulation, hatmana, that amplifies or increases the heat of the contents of the pot. Type of hatmana, insulation number 2, is maintenance. Doesn't intensify, doesn't increase, just simply maintains the heat that's already there. Now here, Rav Melamed writes, what's the fundamental distinction? You are never allowed to insulate the pot with something that increases and intensifies heat, even if you're doing so before Shabbos. Before Shabbos. Now, before Shabbos, you can insulate with something that maintains heat, but not with something that increases heat. Again, we'll give examples of this. On Shabbos itself, you can't insulate with anything, right? So on Shabbos, no covering, no insulating a pot at all.
So Shabbos morning, you put something on the hot plate.
Cannot. Now again, we still have to define what this is, right?
Uh-huh.
What does it mean to insulate, right? What is the definition of insulation? So let's see. Right now, we're talking categorically, right? So categorically, two forms of insulation. One type we'll call mosif hevel, insulation that increases heat, and inomosif hevel, one insulation that maintains heat. Insulation that intensifies heat, you can't do it at all, even before Shabbos. Oh, so let's see. Good. We're gonna see. Remember, I'll say right now. All I'm doing for you, Rav Melamed is doing for us, is creating the categories without understanding why these categories exist or what exactly is going on over here. So this is a good lesson in Emunah Pshuta. First thing I'm going to ask you is just believe it. Just believe it, and then we'll come to understand it, right? Emunah always comes first. So now I believe, Ani Mamin Be'emunah Shlema, that there are two different types of hatmana. Insulation that increases heat, insulation that maintains heat. If it increases, Asr even Erev Shabbos, right? If it maintains, Mutter on Erev Shabbos, Asr on Shabbos, which for our purposes means that on Shabbos itself, you are never allowed to insulate a pot of food.
Even if it's cooked.
Even if it's cooked. This is all presupposing the food is cooked, right? Because if it's not cooked and you're insulating, then you have a bigger problem because then you're actually creating cooking, right? Correct. So this is so. Let's see. So Nevarios.
Just to the point of Michael Ben Yerushalayim further.
No. So this in order for this to even become a kasha, the food has to be fully cooked. If the food is not fully cooked, you can't do any type of insulation because then in some way you're going to be accelerating cooking process, which is always asur on Shabbos. So look at the last paragraph on 212. And here, Rav Melamed explains this a little bit more. Nevar Yosef, let's explain this a little bit more. Yeshnam chumrim tosesim sheyotzrim chom. So we'll say, he says, for example, there are certain types of insulation that generate additional heat. Now from a Talmudic perspective, kigon, lemashal, psoles shel zeisim otavet. So we'll just have to take, this is the Gemara, we'll take the Gemara's word for it, that apparently, if you insulate your pot with olive pulp, right, you pack olive pulp around your pot, or for that matter, straw, that'll not only maintain, but that'll actually increase heat. Truth is, if you've ever been to an olive press, so you'll notice something interesting, olive pulp is warm. Olive pulp actually gives off heat. Straw, I don't know, but olive pulp. Well, I mean, I know he says it.
You couldn't fill up
a bore. Yeah, correct. With olive pulp, exactly. So we'll say, so over here, excellent. So we'll say, so over here, sa'alocha l'maisa, So Lamaisa, what you see over here is, so this is the first type of insulation of Hatmana. So olive pulp, so straw. So we'll say, what's the issue over here? So here we go. V'chashashu chachamim shemyatminu be'erev Shabbos ba'osam achomim shemosifim chom mitoch kach yu anoshim sheyitu v'yatminu be'erev Shabbos gam b'soch gecholim. Oh, so what are we concerned about? If we allow you to use even on Erev Shabbos, the type of insulation that goes ahead and enhances and increases heat, what are we concerned about? And we'll say, what's the best kind of insulation? Right, the best kind of insulation? Coals. So we're concerned that what's going to happen if we allow you to use, let's say, olive pulp or anything else that, for that matter, generates additional heat. Person's going to come to cover and insulate their pot with coals, and the problem is what? Shemi yichata. Once we have coals, then we're concerned that you may come to stoke the flame, stoke the coals. And stoke the coals, of course, is an issue of havara, of kindling. Therefore, v'yavo achar kach b'Shabbos lidei chitui b'gecholim she'asr mishum havara. V'lachein. I'm sorry? So the way it seems to get around this is, it's like the Gemara often says, like, it's gezerah chadahi. It's all part of the original gezerah. It's all one big gezerah with a couple of different branches. So he says, v'lachein asru litmon asat avshilim nekdei Shabbos b'so chumrim she mosifim chom. So Rabbi says, so this is it. So therefore, on Erev Shabbos, I cannot insulate a pot with insulation that will intensify heat. What am I concerned about? That if we allow you to use insulation that we call mosif chom, adds additional heat, you may come to insulate with coals, and once you're using coals, there's a concern you may come to stoke them, and the concern of stoking coals ultimately again is havara, of kindling. Now both say, if this sounds like Rabbi Yehuda is saying like a lot of different steps, remember, in Hilchos Shabbos is both like this. Because violation of Shabbos is so severe, so there are multiple levels. There are multiple layers of just protection against the malacha. So this is our first category of insulation with an item that intensifies heat, and therefore you can't even do this on Erev Shabbos. Page 213. Okay, now that's category one. And I will say, we're going to apply this. Now you might think to yourself, well, that doesn't contemporarily apply today. You know, when are you going to ever have Hatmana in a davar shemosif chol? So we'll see in just a little bit. Page 213. So for example, what about insulating a pot with something that does not increase heat, but it maintains it? What are examples of that? Kidugmas, bigodim, magavos, smichos. So for example, clothing, towels, covers, these are things, they do not intensify heat. Right? They simply maintain. So what's the halacha? Mutar litmon. So you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to insulate a pot like this. Ubitnai shatmana te'aslef neknisa Shabbos. As long as what? As long as you're doing this before Shabbos starts. So as long as you're doing this type of hatmana before Shabbos starts, you're good to go. Aval b'Shabbos asru chachamim litmon tafshil chom afilu b'chumrim she'ena mosifim chom. But on Shabbos itself, you cannot do any kind of hatmana, no kind of insulation, even with what we'll call maintenance insulation. You can't do it. Now, what's the reason? Mishum shachashashu shemyiyu mutar litmon b'Shabbos, because Chazal, the rabbis, were concerned that if we allow you to do this hatmana on Shabbos, you anoshim sheyechamamu tchila as atavshil ala ish v'yavru al isravaro bishol. So this is actually interesting. We're concerned that if we allow you to insulate on Shabbos, even with maintenance insulation, that you may come to warm things up directly on the fire. And that can lead to two prohibitions. Number one is manipulation of the fire, which is havara, kindling, or potential bishul, cooking. Okay, so we'll say, so therefore again, sahalocha l'maisa, these are two distinct categories. So here we go. Seer, shehotman be'erev Shabbos, b'davar she'ena mosif hevel. So mutar lahosif v'lehetiv es hatmana, so ba'od smichos. So we'll say, so now let's play this out. So here's what we have. So therefore again, let's I have a pot of food. It's on my blech on Erev Shabbos. So now I want to go ahead. It's a cold day, or maybe the lid doesn't fit so well on the pot. So again, we still have more details to fill in over here. But Lamaisa, what the halacha is saying is like this. On Erev Shabbos, what are my options? So to surround it with olive pulp, right, or straw, can't do it. Why? Because that intensifies heat. and you can't even insulate with the item that intensifies heat on Erev Shabbos, lest you come to insulate with coals and violate Havara. But what I can do is cover it with towels or with covers or with other things like that maintain heat. I can do that Erev Shabbos. But on Shabbos itself, no hatmana at all. Can't do anything. Okay, so therefore he says, Sir, shehutman be'erev Shabbos b'davar she'en mosif hevel, mutar lahosif or laheitiv es hatmanas ba'od smichos. So, right? So therefore, if you have a pot of food, and let's say you insulated it on Erev Shabbos. So for example, let's say on Erev Shabbos I have my pot of food, and I covered it with towels. Okay, so that's mutar on Erev Shabbos. This is on the blech. Is on the blech, on a covered fire. That's what we're assuming right now. So what's the halacha? So remember, you could add on additional blankets or additional towels on Shabbos. That's not a problem, right? Because as long as you started the process before Shabbos, the insulation process before Shabbos, and it's a permitted type of insulation process, you could even add on. You can add on more towels or more blankets afterwards. Similarly, let's say your pot bubbled over a little bit, and some of the towels got dirty, and you want to swap out the dirty towels for clean towels. You could do that also.
Altogether.
So we're going to qualify this. Here we go. Now, not only that, by the way, and see this is to your point. Let's say you covered your pot with a towel before Shabbos, and the towel fell off. You're allowed to return it. Allowed to put it back on. What's the logic? Shahoil v'hesir kvar hayat. Shahoil v'hasir kvar hayat taman b'knisas haShabbos ein isur lehetiv es hatmanasal. So this is an important halacha. So essentially, once on Erev Shabbos, you insulated that pot in a mutter way. Now remember again, the only way to insulate a pot in a permitted way on Erev Shabbos is how? What type of insulation? Maintenance insulation. So once you did that on Erev Shabbos, you're good. To the point that even on Shabbos itself, you could swap out the blankets, you could add blankets, even if the towel fell off, you could replace it, no problem. Mutter, similarly again, mutter, lemali b'Shabbos, turmus, b'mayim chamin. So for example, turmus is a thermos. Turmus is Hebrew for thermos. These Israelis need to get a little bit more imaginative, right? So mutter, lemali b'Shabbos, turmus, b'mayim chamin. Be'ein ze nechshav katmana b'Shabbos, Mishum she'ein hachnosas davar cham l'soch kli nechshavas hatmana. So both say this is very important. So you say to yourself, 1 second. Let's say I want to go to shul. I want to go to shul and I want to take. This is a new thing, by the way. About people bringing walking in with a cup of coffee to shul. Again, I don't feel like such an old man, but when I was a kid, no one ever did this. Yeah. You drink coffee at home. But when you come to shul is not the place where you put down your coffee. You put down this. It's like you feel like you want to offer people a Danish, like they feel terrible. Hey, you have the coffee. It looks so delicious. Maybe some pastries, a little cart. We can walk around up and down. Right? But again, it might not be a bad idea. It'll be a good fundraiser. Right? Sure. Right, correct. So let's say again, even the walking to shul with a cup of coffee, I never fully understood. I don't understand. Wake up a few minutes earlier, have your coffee like a mensch, sit down and just eat your. Okay, and then. So, what about putting coffee or putting hot water, for that matter, into a thermos on Shabbos? Is that hatmana? Because after all, again, think about this for just a moment. What category would a thermos fit into? Maintenance, right? Maintenance. So again, are you allowed to do maintenance hatmana on Shabbos? No. So what about putting hot water into a thermos? So here, interestingly enough, the Mechaber writes, he says that's not called hatmana. Hatmana, the definition of hatmana, what?
It's not on the fire.
Right. He says it's even more than that. Even aside that it's not on the fire, he says it's something else. He says the act of hatmana is not introducing food into a utensil. That's not hatmana. The act of hatmana is taking a utensil and insulating the utensil. See, he says it's dramatically different. So the act of placing food into a kli is it's putting food into a kli. That's not a malacha. It's not a malacha. Hatmana means, again, the food is in the kli, and now you're putting something additional on top of the kli in order to insulate. This is going to become very, very, very important when we come to talk about crock pots. I don't know, either a little bit later or in Meretz Hashem next week.
Insulation on food versus putting food into insulation? Like you're putting the hot water into the thermos?
I don't think so. I don't think halacha makes that distinction. In other words, what's being placed into what? I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. Like if your towels were like fashioned like a opening, and you were to put the pot in there on Shabbos, I still think that'd be problematic.
Okay.
I think. So it's looking right. It says, "V'chein mutar lahaniach besoch sir hachamin sakit uba orez o machal achar shein rotzim sheis are besoch shar hachamin shein hatmana ochal besoch ochal." This is another interesting idea about saying there's no such thing as hatmana with food into food. So let's say, for example, the example he gives over here is, let's say again, I have a pot of food and I want to put, let's say, a bag of rice, cooked rice, right? Cooked rice. But I want to put the rice into the food, right? I want to warm the rice, let's say, which is mutter, right? I want to warm the rice, but I don't want the rice to get mixed in with everything else. So now when I put the rice in, what's going to happen? The rice is going to be surrounded on all sides by the food. Isn't that hatmana? So the Mechaber says no. The definition of so again, it's interesting, these exceptions to the rule. So covering food with another type of food is not hatmana. So again, putting food into a kli is also not hatmana. That'd be like the chocolate pot. Correct. We're going to see. Now the truth is, the crock pot, this is what I'm very excited about, this this discussion over here gets into the essence of using crock pots on Shabbos. So again, but yes, correct. It could be putting stuff in crock pots. Yes.
Why isn't the olive pulp considered food?
I don't think that the people. I think because that was the way it wasn't used as a food item. In other words, the way it was dafka used was as an insulation material.
And the tavern, that's used for
Like a little lemon.
The tavern, I think, is animal feed. But I'm saying, I think in those cases, you're dafka using it as a form of insulation. I think people were repurposing it for this purpose. So it was designated for this particular use. So I think, if you were to take another food and cover your pot.
rice to use as insulation, but not to eat it, that would be a problem.
I'm sorry, say it again.
If you take a bag of rice to use as insulation,
And cover the food?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, rice would probably be like a maintenance installation. So so you couldn't do it on Shabbos. Correct.
And what about putting a baby bottle?
Oh, so we're gonna. So b'pashtos, that's not going to be a problem, right? Because that's food into food. So warming up a baby bottle by putting it into, let's say, I fill up a washing cup filled with water, hot water. Right? I put the water from the urn, put it into the washing cup, then put the baby bottle in there. B'pashtos, that should not be a problem of hatmana. Now, whether or not it's a problem of bishul is a different discussion, right? Because again, if the baby bottle is cold, and you're warming up that milk. Now again, if you're warming up the milk to Yatzoledesbo, they should be calling, child services on you, right? But Lamaisa, right, it's a cliche, eno mavashal. So there's a lot of ways around that, but it for sure wouldn't be a hatmana issue. Let's just finish up this last item, and then we'll have to stop here for tonight. He says, "V'chein mutar la'aniach besoch siacham min sakit u'ba'orez omacha achar she'no sifein she'ein hatmana ochal besoch ochal." So two interesting exceptions. So therefore, again, there's no such thing as hatmana into other ochal besoch ochal. So two interesting exceptions to this. So number one, it's never called hatmana when you're putting food into a kli. So let's say water into a thermos, even though again a thermos is a form of maintenance insulation, is not halachic hatmana. And similarly again, putting, let's say, cold food into warm food or whatever, putting food into food and using that outer food to go ahead and, so to speak, insulate the inner food is also not going to be a problem as well. We'll stop over for today. You can see, by the way, the next section in Chav Gimel is Hatmana al Plata V'sir Lebishul Iti. So and if you look in the parentheses, Krak Pat, right? So that's so again, we'll get to this in Meretz Hashem. We'll get to this next week, and I will say what's going to be incredibly important about this is that this is going to give us a little bit of a definition also about the concept of Hatmana.
Next week.
That is, I'm avoiding eye contact with Moshe David because he's like a taskmaster. I can't deal with the Saturdays.
It's good because my guilt at the beginning didn't work.
It did. You got the WhatsApp group going. All right, enough guilt. We're on.